Okay, please listen carefully.
Oh, looks like I got all this.
I'm sorry, I need your attentions. I'm gonna get mad and punch Liam. There are 29 of you in the room right now. I need you all to sign in to this class on AP Central, and I need you also to understand how things work. You're automatically selected for the exam, so it will automatically sign you up for an exam, which is kind of convenient and smooth, and data shows that when kids sign up early, they're more likely to do better on the exam. So I guess that's why they're doing that. I'm not sure I support that strategy, but anyway. If you know that you're not going to take the AP test, you still sign up. And even though you might be certain that you're not going to take the AP exam, you still sign up for the class. Then later we can remove you from the exam. But I need everybody to have access to the AP classroom stuff, and that window closes in a little while. So far I've got Bierman, Braverman, Connors, Foreman, Guerra, Guerra, Cuevas, Herrera, Hubbard, Johansson, Baloney, Martinez, Miller, Noon, Ostavani, Rojas, Sutherland, Van Zant, and Weiss, or Weiss. Sam, how do you say your last name?
Weiss.
So Weiss, Weiss it is. 2 more people have added since I said that. We're up to 19. I can give you a couple more minutes.
I'm doing that right now.
You're like date. I mean, like what's the date? Like it's the 28th.
You what?
There are literally so many things enter. Like, why is this not?
No, that's not.
I love that.
I made it in English.
So I'm fucking done with it.
Where do you do it?
When you go to return,
Oh shit, there we
when you
go.
go to well, that's nothing compared to 66 degrees here. Freaking cold.
Layers.
Are you serious, dog?
Do you like have this in emails or what?
Damn.
Oh, it's saved on my
We're up to 21. That's not bad. Hurry up. I got to go do things.
Am I in there?
11. Oh, yes. 22. This is good. Now, while you're doing stuff, I need to say a couple things. The process to get you opted out of the exam is really simple. It just takes a single step. You have to send a single email, and they'll just go, "Are you sure you don't want to take the exam?" And you say, "Yes, I'm sure," and it's all good. It's all good. But if you don't do that, then you just signed up for the test, and then you just pay, and it's all handled. I think if I can get everybody onto the class by Friday of this week, then I think we can all just send a single email. So you can just tell me, not me, and I'll just put your name down, and then we can all tell the assistant principals to opt you out of the exam. So we can do that in bulk. I'll do that work for you, but I need everybody signed up for the class. Up to 25, this is not bad. Only 4 to go. Who are those 4? Who's not signed up for my class? 1.
Is there anyone not here today?
Yeah, 2, she's not here. Riali is 3. Anybody else? There's 1 more.
Why are you reading Walton, you good? You gonna turn my back
Bronson's good. Bronson's good. Nailed it. Oh, Ty. Taking his test. So I guess we're gonna move on. Thank you everybody for signing up. In a couple of days, we'll have that step where you can opt out. Put away your devices unless you're still working on the sign-in part. David, Matt, if you guys want to keep working on this, go ahead. Chloe's got this, don't worry about it. Next, here we are with Unit 4. First, I'd like everybody to please record all of your assignment due dates. 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, there's only 4 assignments in this unit. Pre-lab 1, another pre-lab. You have to bring dirt. That's a whole entire homework assignment just to bring a bag of dirt. Then there's 2 separate post-labs due right before the exam.
Does it count as like writing it down if we take a picture of it?
Yeah, I don't need you. I'm not checking your writing.
I know last time that someone grabbed a question sheet on Friday, you said there was something wrong with it, but do you know if this one is like...
I haven't heard of any typos yet. Nothing jumps out at me as being flawed at this point.
Do you think the sheer amount of work?
Are you making the headings for the gradebook?
I'm just sorting them into periods.
I think one of the periods already has the headings, so if you want to start putting in the gradebook, that'd be good.
Okay, I can do that.
Liam, you've done this before, putting the headings? It's the Day of Veterans,
When?
the 11th
When
of
it
November.
says no school.
Right there where it says no school. You're gonna get one packet for 2 separate labs at a later date, sometime this week. Warning, 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 it always gets messed up, kids always screw this up. I know this will be a problem. Everybody who's distracted will mess this up. Please stop your distractions for a second. This lab is titled Soil Salinization, and this lab is titled Soil Lab. So because both titles have the word soil in them, chaos ensues. Riot in the streets, Molotov cocktails, glass shields, stabbings.
Why don't you just call it the salinization lab in the soil?
Because I always forget. That's probably why I didn't make a packet. I probably have a note in my originals to change it finally. But I didn't think it would be that confusing, and kids don't understand what gets salinated, so I wanted to keep that reference in there. I thought it was important. I'll probably have to change this one. Oh God.
Maybe
Okay.
name one of them dirt.
Yeah, I guess the dirt lab.
I like
The other lab?
No, I think it's settled. Okay, it's gonna be the dirt lab. Now, please look up. There are 2 separate labs, 2 separate pre-labs, 2 separate post-labs in one packet. The labs have parts, like part 1, part 2. So eventually kids just go, ah! And it's just chaos. And just ball all their papers up and rub them on their faces and light everything on fire.
Exciting.
The amount of chaos this causes, it's like all year long. Like I'll be cleaning up the grade book the day that the seniors graduate, and somebody's gonna come by and go, hey, can we fix my soil pre-lab, post-lab salinization problem because I need to graduate? So I want to give you a heads up. I'll bring you that packet later. And one part of the labs is there's a whole entire assignment for bringing soil. And in case there's any confusion, I wanted to get the idea out there now that yes, you literally have to bring a bag of dirt from someplace near your home.
Is there any like specifications, or can you
Yeah.
literally just get a chunk of dirt?
You'll have to move aside the organic material on the top, so no leaves and sticks. It can't be bagged dirt, so if people have made like a little planting bed for you, or like if it's like where a potted plant died, that would not work. It can't be bagged dirt, it has to be native soil. And those are kind of the only rules. It has to be a place that's near your home. We need the real estate map. We don't really need more dirt from the school. Yeah, those are the only rules. And I'll go over this all later because it's such a big clutter up. Next, I'll give you 5 points of extra credit, which is the largest extra credit assignment in semester number 1. If you'll read a book between now and January, you have like 3 months or something, 2 months. Please read this part. So from the heading down to the first book, and I'll tell you about them. Put the paper on your head when you're done. Put the paper on your head when you're done.
Bless you.
I'm trying to make a set that I can hold up to show people, so as I go through them, can you look through here and line them up on me? First 3. And here's the last one. Do a couple more. Here's the way that this works. I wanted to advertise this assignment early because a lot of you have really busy winter holiday, but maybe Thanksgiving is an option for you. In my case, I travel those. I'll be gone Thanksgiving, I'll be gone winter, so for me, it would be easier to read a book during the remaining parts of the school year. I don't know where you fit in. Some of you have a boring ass seminar. Maybe you can just read a book during seminar and pick up a bunch of points in this class. I wanted to give you a bunch of time. So you've got like pretty much 2 months. The day you get back from winter break at lunch, I'll have a stack of tests in my room. And you just tell me which book you read, and I give you your quiz, and all you got to do is prove that you read the book, and you earn 5 points of extra credit, which is a lot. 5 points of extra credit is more than 1 letter grade on any exam. It's more than one of the weekend activities. And all these books are really good, and you can find one that suits your personality. So I think it's actually like a good mix of like enrichment in high school and like personal fulfillment and a fair amount of credit and a good way to help your grade and plenty of time. I would pretty much think everybody should do this. You're all gonna blow it on one exam or another. Yeah.
For the 5 points of extra credit, is it like if you miss like a question or two on the thing, but like you come through and you've read it, do you still get the 5 points?
It's kind of all or nothing. But the questions aren't like trivia, like what color was the shirt the guy was wearing on page 39. It's like the main theme of the book and like the ending of the book and like the most surprising thing that you remember from the book, and like you just have to convince me you read it, and it's pretty tough to fake it, but the questions are pretty doable if you read it. Like I don't think I've ever had a kid who actually read the book that felt they couldn't pass the test. I don't think that's ever happened. I've read all these books. I read a lot of books. A lot of the books I've read were not really worth recommending to you, but I've picked out a handful. I can tell you all about these. Like, how many of you would like my 1 or 2 minute reviews of each of these titles so that you can choose one? Okay, so Aoife's going to try to hold them up if we can find them in time. Are we there?
Not yet.
Definitely there. Okay. First, I'm going to go in the order of the titles. Desert Solitaire. Actually, Bronson can hold them up while Aoife keeps searching. Yeah! Flix, I love you, man. You gotta come live in my house. You're so good. You're so good. Yeah, right there. There we go. They start from the right. Yeah, you got this. Yeah, that way. Hold it up high. Okay. Desert Solitaire is like one of the most famous naturalist books in the history of the English language. It was written by this really famous American author named Edward Abbey. Desert Solitaire is about a year that this guy spent as a national park ranger in the desert. And like it sounds, he was alone. You can just take a nap for now, bro. Yes, books have pages, sometimes many. Evan's mind is blown. All these words! God! Evan, I'll point out for you the shortest book, and I'll point out the one with the most pictures. So don't worry about it, I got you, bro. Back to me, though. Desert Solitaire is like extremely famous. It's considered to be like a gem of naturalist writing because this guy's by himself in the desert, and so he has like long conversations with this mouse in his cupboard. And he writes like probably more than 100 pages about how different wood has different character in a fire.
It sounds like you.
And there's like really good and really bad about Desert Solitaire. It like it's like deeply steeped in like the spirituality of nature. It's like a really, really like thoughtful, pensive, naturalist book. Flip side is it's really, really slow. Like 20 pages about a meteor storm. Meteor shower. And like, yeah, meteor showers, that's nature, but like 20 pages of it? So the place where that book really fits is if you're like stuck in a cabin in the snow for all the winter break, bingo. If you're like gonna be on a backpacking trip, like if you're solo for 2 weeks, perfect. Like live on a sailboat, bingo. But it's not like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's not going to keep up with all of your daily distractions.
Are any of these books going to be like that?
Yeah, the other one, the next one. Monkey Wrench Gang, sex, drugs, rock and roll, dynamite, chainsaws, car chases. I am not kidding. Yeah.
What exactly do you mean philosophical musings?
What?
Yeah. So I code all of these books for what I liked about them. So these are kind of like my interests. So I'm a naturalist and I like books that are about nature, just natural stuff. I like books that are like science and nerdy stuff because I'm a hardcore nerd. Some of these are philosophical, like humans' place in the universe. Like, what are we here for? What do we do? Why are we all here? Like, Evan found the shortest book already. Way to focus, Evan. I knew you would find it, little buddy. Now give it back, because Blix has a job to do. All right. And then there's one about cultural commentary. You know, like our society, like what are we doing right and wrong? So commentary about our culture. So Edward Abbey wrote 2 books that I recommend. Desert Solitaire is probably one of like the spaciest books. Monkey Wrench Gang, hit it, Blix. Monkey Wrench Gang looks like a big read. I know that Evan's intimidated, but it's actually like pretty doable. It's like an adventure book. Apparently, it's a real story about his life, but he couldn't admit it because it's full of crimes. And so he wrote it as a fiction story. And all these people are like, doesn't that sound like that guy that the author knows? And like, wait, isn't there a photo of the author doing something like this? And so during the 1970s, Edward Abbey was an environmental activist. And there was this movement among environmentalists to basically, what's it called? Like, to sabotage development. So they would go to like housing complexes being built and they would start arson fires. They like blew up car dealerships.
That's why it's called Monkey Wrench, because they're kind of throwing shit
That's
around.
right. It's called a Monkey Wrench Gang because they are throwing a monkey wrench in the system. That's the term. And so it's a fictionalized story with like drunk driving car chases through the desert with the police. But apparently it's like inspired by real events and it's kind of heady. And kids love it because it's like action packed and it moves really fast and it's like an engaging story. I honestly didn't like it that much.
Did you steal it from a library?
No, that's my personal library.
Oh wow!
I know. Did you look at I have like a press that puts my name on stuff. Watch here, give me something. Give me something. Give me your papers. Give me one of your papers. Give me your notebook. Give me your notebook. From the personal library of Jose Caballero.
That's beautiful.
I have a little lending library.
Oh, it's in that little. Oh wait, that's not ink, is it?
Back to me. All right.
I thought it was more ink.
Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. Hit it, Blix. The next one in order, if you hadn't thrown them all in a pile. There we go. Yeah, Silent Spring. This is probably the single most iconic book in the history of environmental science. This is the book that started the science. So like the article was The Tragedy of the Commons, and the book was Silent Spring. This lady had this crazy idea that our human activities in one place can affect ecosystems in surprising ways far away. She's the lady who figured out that the agricultural sprays in the Ventura River Basin were affecting bald eagles at Santa Cruz Island. You heard about the eggs getting soft and the mama bird would lay in the nest and they would crush all the eggs because of the DDT in their diet? That's her. And so the only reason I don't give this book more stars is, you know, it's kind of a science-y book and it was written like 40 years ago and by now I've heard so much about it that it was kind of hard for me to read. But it is very, very good. Next. The Earth First Reader. Do I have a copy of that left? Oh, I do. So I need to warn you guys about something. The Earth First Reader, Earth First was an environmental terrorist organization. That's not a joke. I'm not trying to make light of this. I am not actually a terrorist, despite the beard. I don't take this lightly. I actually have a lot to complain about with Earth First. They coincidentally almost killed a friend of mine. Fun fact.
How?
So Earth First, we're trying to use any means necessary to protect nature. And so like loggers would be heading into a forest and they would like set bear traps. And they would take like pieces of rebar and tuck them into the bark of redwood trees so that the loggers would come through with a chainsaw and hit rebar and break a chain. And when you break a chain, it can be really dangerous because it can whip around the tree and hurt someone, or it can cut off from the saw and fly out. And 40 years later, one of my homies, Chris, was a wildland forest ranger in a firefighter in Santa Cruz, and they were trying to save a redwood forest, and somebody was cutting a tree, broke his chain, could have hurt him. In fact, it didn't hurt him. It flew off and hit another firefighter and like cut that guy in half, you know, like he didn't like break in pieces, but he got like wrapped in a high-speed chain, and so it basically just gave him a cut all the way around his body. And they were like, well, I guess we can't fight this fire, and they had to pull out these firefighters that were trying to protect this old-growth forest, and the old-growth redwoods burned down. Like, this is my point, that terrorism is not smart because any means necessary is not appropriate. So I'm not an advocate for Earth First. However, in the 1970s, there was a lot of really beautiful and poetic writing about nature, and I really do appreciate the writing of some of the people in that book. This is an awkward moment for me. I don't want you to be terrorists. I'm not a terrorist. Human life first. But this has some beautiful writing about nature, so I kind of recommend that that book. Next, there's 2 books by Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Yeah. And Collapse. Do you have a copy of Collapse up there? You do? Guns, Germs, and Steel, many of you have read. They used to make high school kids read it until a couple of years ago when those teachers decided that the students complained too much. Look at how big that book is. Hold it up really high, homie. And the other one? So this guy is like one of the biggest nerds I know. I've met him. He's a fascinating genius. What Jared Diamond does really well is he takes a variety of scientific sources, blends them, and comes up with a really fascinating way to understand humans.
In like a lot of words. A lot of.
The problem is he's an academic, you know, like he probably gets paid by the page. He's a professor at UCLA, and he's like really wordy, and he talks in big sentences, and you think I talk too much, you gotta meet that guy. He and I were having a conversation with my buddy in a hurry, and at some point my buddy's like, I'm just gonna leave because you guys will, like, he's got a lot on his mind, and it is really interesting to read. Guns, Germs, and Steel is about imperialism. Collapse is about societies in a time of environmental change. You might remember my lecture about Easter Island at the beginning of the year. That's like the first couple chapters of the Collapse book.
You made us read a section from it.
I did?
Yeah.
I don't think I did. The worst mistake in the history of mankind?
Yeah.
That's not from that book. But it inspired another book. It inspired next, affluenza. I hope you all captured the name. Affluence is wealth, and influenza is the flu, a disease. So affluenza is a made-up word for the disease of affluence, of wealth. It talks about how modern societies are impacted by consumerism. If you're a socialist like me, you might find this. You wasn't me. You might find this book really interesting. It's about how much our country has changed, how we're all unhappy and working too hard, and we have too much stuff, and that's a struggle. It's about all the environmental impacts of consumerism and the social impacts of consumerism. I gotta tell you a couple things. Affluenza is very easy to read. It's like written at a conversational tone. It has tons and tons of data. And it looks at consumerism from many points of view. So our trash, our international relationships, human rights, air pollution, human happiness, the workday, family structure, neighborhood structure. It's like a really interesting, holistic view of consumerism. I should probably warn you, that's one of the more like leftist angled books. So if that's not comfortable for you, I understand. I'm aware of its bias. Last American Man is probably the fastest book to read, Evan Facenda.
No, the other one was a little shorter, so.
Yeah, but this one goes faster. First of all, this woman went on to write Eat, Pray, Love, which many of you know.
Yeah.
She wrote this before that, when she was a younger author. This book is non-fiction. It's about this guy who was about your age when he pulled a Riali, but completely bailed from everything. In this book, the story starts with this guy like grabbing a pocket knife and leaving his wallet on the table, and he walks outside and he like ghosts into the forest for I don't know how many years.
Yeah, but he did that successfully.
What's that?
He did it successfully.
Matt might pull it off still, we'll see. Eustace Conway, the dude in this book, he's like, all this money's a joke, all this education is a joke, all this like houses and laundry detergent are a joke, and he just like goes for it and like basically by himself like kills his own meat and builds his own shelter and like shivers through winter in Appalachia and like suffers a lot and like loses hella weight and like pulls his own teeth, and it's like pretty effing intense. This guy is not my hero. Turns out he's kind of a misogynist and kind of a bully and kind of a jerk. But I was inspired by his detachment from society, and I think it's kind of cool. By the way, as soon as I remember the title, I'm adding another book about another hermit, another person who intentionally drops out of society.
Jose, the autobiography.
Yes. Paul Hawkins' Blessed Unrest is mostly an economics book. But it's a weird field of economics called environmental economics or sustainable economics. This guy, Paul Hawkins, is all about like, what's it like to run an economy that's socially just and environmentally sustainable. Kind of a curious point of view. This book, Blessed Unrest, is about protest, about social unrest. Blessed Unrest is about the world's poor sort of fighting back against imperialism. Sort of interesting, different look on economics. That's all I can say about it. Mark Hertzgaard, is that one in there? Earth Odyssey?
Yeah.
Sorry, do you have the book, I mean, Blix?
I don't see it.
I don't see it either. I had it once, but I don't see it in your pile. It looks sort of like a black spine with small white words on it. So Earth Odyssey, kind of a trippy book. This guy says, oh, all these environmental problems aren't so bad. Look at all these solutions. And it's kind of inspiring. He'll go to Norway and be like, oh, here's a guy that built a better wind turbine, see? And oh, here's a guy that built better concrete. We don't have to worry about climate change. But a lot of his solutions aren't really scaled to match the problem. It's oh no, we have an opioid epidemic, but you can do sit-ups. And I feel like a lot of his solutions are a little bit unrealistic. But it's, I don't know, it's kind of a cool book. It's not all dreary. It's international, it's very optimistic. If you're into engineering, or you're into problem solving, maybe this is a good book for you. Barbara Kingsolver, this is not a pejorative for me. Everybody thinks it's an insult, but I just mean it as a description. She writes chick books.
What is a pejorative? What would I do?
Pejorative is a word that's intended to have a negative connotation. So there's words that can just be a descriptor, and then there's words that are a descriptor, but we mean that as not cool. So for me, chick book is not a pejorative, but does everybody know that Ernest Hemingway is probably the most macho writer? Have you heard this before? Ernest Hemingway, very macho? If he's a dude book, and I think he is, Barbara Kingsolver is a chick book. And I enjoy both of them. I've read almost everything Hemingway wrote, and I've definitely read everything she wrote, and I like all of them. So this doesn't, you don't have to fit that role, but it's written from a very woman's point of view, and women usually identify with the books in a different way than men do. Barbara Kingsolver wrote one of the first Oprah book club books. She wrote the Poisonwood Bible, which was a really famous book 15, 20 years ago. Here, I've recommended 2 books by her. Animal, Vegetable, Miracle, which is a nonfiction book about her trying to live on a sustainable diet for 1 year with all of her family. And they talk about the parts that are easy and the parts that are difficult about having a sustainable diet. Then she also wrote a book called Prodigal Summer that I recommend. Do you have a green book, Prodigal Summer? The spine and cover are all green.
Do you have Zen and Motorcycle Millions?
I don't see that book's
So the problem with her nonfiction book is it's kind of just a story about her, but Prodigal Summer is really beautiful. It's like a woman's version of Desert Solitaire, but it's fiction. So in Prodigal Summer, a woman becomes a forest ranger, has a summer by herself in some remote wilderness cabin in a national park in Appalachia. And it's a really lovely book. I guess I have to warn you about this. I believe it has sex in it. Okay, Mark Kurlansky has written a whole bunch of books. I recommend 2 of them. Hold those up, one boy. Cod and Salt. This guy talks about world history based on a critical resource. So apparently, we would never have had European imperialism if they weren't chasing that fish around. And apparently we wouldn't have money if it wasn't for salt. And if you're really into history, the beautiful thing about this guy's books is it shows you how our modern society was shaped by these historic resources. I actually think that they're fascinating books. But you gotta be into history. And I'm actually not. So I really thought that they were neat, but the part that I kept getting stuck on was, oh, this is a history book, right? And like, I don't know, like for me the 1640s and the 1690s and the 1720s start to blur together, and I'm like, that's 100 pages, what am I doing here?
You're really selling this on some of these.
Well, there's kids that are different from me. So some kid who's really into world history, they would like this book. That's what I'm telling you. Like, it's not for everybody. The John Muir books, I would accept a bunch of different John Muir books. Do you have The Wilderness World of John Muir right there? So that's my favorite. But John Muir wrote a couple of books and 1,000,000 essays. And I like his essays better than his books, and that's a collection of his essays. There's other collections. If you want to propose a different John Muir book because you already started it or it's on your shelf at home, I'm open to other collections of John Muir. Yeah.
Are you saying they're like almost short stories then?
Yeah, they're all like 2 to 20 pages. And it's like him walking through the forest, or him getting caught in a storm, or his dog chasing a buffalo. And like, they're just little snippets of his life in nature. And I think that they're beautiful. They're like super iconic Americana. This is like the heart of America's relationship with nature. The John Muir writings are really historic, but to give you some warning, they're about 160 years old. So the writing is different and the context is different than you're used to. And they're kind of babbly. Like they have a lot of words. Sort of Shakespearean, like blah, blah, blah. Why did you say it with so many words? But John Muir is spectacular, and a lot of you think of yourself as naturalist, or you think of yourself as cerebral, this would be good for that. If you don't want to read that one, I'm open to other collections of his essays. Oh, do we have a copy of Zen? All right. Children, I have to warn you, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is debatably one of the hardest to read books of the last century.
It's really good.
In the way that Tragedy of the Commons is, I think, over many of our heads, that book is over many of our heads. I've tried to read it a number of times. I've finished it twice. I still don't know what the hell it's about. My most intellectual students will try this book, and a few of them will finish it. It's a philosophy book, and it's a framed book. So it's like a story, but then if you think about it differently, it's about how we think, and then if you read that really carefully, it's about how we can control what we think, and then if you read it differently, it's about who we are and what is thought. So people teach university philosophy classes on that book. You can just read that book for a whole course in philosophy. It's a big deal. It's also really fascinating, about our will and our thought. Leventhal liked it?
It was slow moving, but it was the entire time it was mind-blowing.
Yeah, mind-blowing. Blix, will you open the front cover of that pink book, the Zen Motorcycle Maintenance, the cover? If you just look inside, all the kids who read this copy have left little inscriptions, and they're all like, oh my god, I can't believe this, my mind is blown, or dude, this is the gnarliest book I ever read, or it'll be difficult, but you should finish this book. And if you do borrow my copy, I'd like you to add an inscription.
Well, the best copy.
I don't have a copy of The Omnivore's Dilemma, do I?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think someone stole that one. Then again, almost every one of your moms and dads has this book. It's probably at your house already. Omnivore's Dilemma was a really big whoop. It was a New York Times bestseller for a super long time. Michael Pollan got really famous on it. It's about how to have a sustainable diet if you enjoy food. And I gotta say, just if I may, this guy wrote the book about my food philosophy right after I put it together. Sometime right after college, I started thinking a lot about how I wanted to eat and how I wanted to shape my diet. And then this book came out, and like every page I was reading, I was like, yeah, that, yeah, what he said. And like it really captures like how I think about food. If you don't mind, a quick little aside. This is probably the most important environmental topic that you'll ever learn about, because you can make decisions about this multiple times a day, every day of your entire life. Like transportation is really important, but sometimes you just got to take a job and then you're going to be doing that job for 30 years. Like I made a choice about the car to buy, and 14 years later, I'm still driving that car. So that's the only time in my life I made a decision about a vehicle.
Yeah, that's
I like it, I'm not complaining. I mean to say that that's like a few decisions in your lifetime. Maybe you'll buy a car 3, 4, 5 times in your life. If you're rich, 7 or 8. But like we made 4 food decisions yesterday, and we're gonna make at least 4 food decisions today. And if you break that down into every ingredient, the most you interact with the environment is food. So omnivore's dilemma is a really big deal about the environment. Mark Reisner's Cadillac Desert. Oh yeah. Children, that is actually a textbook. Don't be fooled. It's soft cover, but it's a textbook. That book is used to teach water policy. I knew Mark Reisner. He's a local from Mammoth Lakes, California. He recently died early. He died really young, like my age or younger. He had kind of a crappy death, and I really sympathize with his family. He's a wonderful, famous, well-known dude. And basically, living in Mammoth Lakes, he just got tired of everybody talking about water policy, so he spent like 20 years of his life looking into it. And then he wrote a book about it. And now, if you care at all about law or policy, like if you think you're going to be an environmental lawyer or you want to be a politician, you got to read that book. It's a textbook about water policy. Do I have a copy of Deadly Feasts? I honestly, it's tough to recommend this book. It was one of the first, like, human health controversies. So it's about how, like, our diet affects our health and who's responsible to keep us healthy. It's like a social commentary and science book. It's very historically important. I'm not sure it's that fun to read. Hey Ty, where's your other paper for your exam? The question paper. Okay, Arundhati Roy is one of the most inspiring people ever. She's like a short, poor, brown lady from rural India who's like, kind of sucks being poor, and here we are being poor, getting screwed by the world's corporations. So she like has done something about it, and she's like extremely inspiring. If I'm not mistaken, she's either won a Pulitzer or a Nobel, or maybe both. She wrote a non-fiction book about how global empires affect the world's poor, and then she wrote a fiction book about what it's like to live in a poor community. They're both beautiful books. So Carl Sagan wrote these 2 books about science, and they're really excellent. They completely shaped who I am today. I read them at your age. Matt, hold up The Demon Haunted World. Is that my only copy, Blix? Does he have my only copy? Okay. So The Demon Haunted World, I read it when I was your age, and it made me decide to be a scientist. It's all about how people are stupid and science helps. Tinkering with Eden is all about invasive species.
Wait, what about Billions and Billions?
Billions and Billions is also about the scale of science and the universe. It's about the limits of human knowledge. By the way, Carl Sagan had a young protege whose name is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Maybe you've heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson? The guy who got him into college was Carl Sagan. Last, probably the most recommended book is Alan Wiseman's The World Without Us. If the bell rings, I want you to hear this. Hold that one up. Okay, children, everybody needs to see this book. It organizes all of our problems based on how long they would take to recover after we're gone. So in this book, it's not apocalyptic. Please don't pack up, I gotta finish this description. I want everybody to hear this because it's a compelling book. He starts and he says, imagine the humans are gone. Who cares? Just imagine they're gone. What happens tomorrow? What happens next week? What happens when the nuclear power plants melt? What happens when all the dams break? How long does it take for the nights to be dark again? How long does it take for it to be quiet again? How long does it take for rivers to run naturally again, for the salmon to recover, for biodiversity to catch up, for climate to stabilize? The world without us is every single problem in your textbook organized by how they recover, looking at real examples from all over the world of recovery. It's the most environmental science book, and it's the best parallel to this class. It's the one that will help you the most in Apes. It's really sciencey, but it's kind of a big read. So if you just need an easy cop-out like Evan Facenda, it may not be the right book, but it's super good environmental science.
When do you want us to get these books?
You can check out my spare copies starting now. You can get them from the library. You can use ebooks. But I need my demonstration set. Yeah. There's more comments? Where's that?